Live from San Francisco, California, it's theCUBE at VMworld 2014. Brought to you by VMware, Cisco, EMC, HP, and Nutanix.
Hi, this is Stu Miniman with wikibon.org, here with SiliconANGLE TV's 5th year VMworld 2014, San Francisco, California. Had a little bit of an earthquake Saturday night, definitely kicked things off to a start, at least for me. First time I'd seen a magnitude 6 earthquake, not too far from me. But we're going to be talking about the cloud in this segment. Joining me, first time CUBE guest for both of you, it's Matt Cowger, who's the global VMware architect for EMC, and Patrick Noia, who covers cloud ops and infrastructure program management for VMware. Guys, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, so Patrick, let me start with you. Tell me a little bit of your role at VMware and what you're doing here.
So I work for the internal private cloud for VMware called OneCloud, and in that regard, I am the cloud operations and infrastructure program manager.
Okay, so we heard a lot at in the keynote about how the hybrid cloud was renamed vCloud Air, yes. Through a lot of the partnerships, but that's a different group from you.
That's correct.
So you guys, can give us just a quick, what's the history of the internal cloud from VMware standpoint?
So it was an alignment that came about 3 years ago, by where VMware needed to consolidate and to really bring together all of the cloud infrastructure and service offerings we had internally into a single overarching kind of orchestration and delivery mechanism called OneCloud.
All right, and Matt, you're working with Patrick because the Handson lab runs out of this cloud, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so I have to ask first of all, do we have this conference every year in Moscone because it's not too far from Palo Alto and therefore easier, or for the labs to work? Or
actually, we have 3 primary data centers that are serving as the infrastructure to run Handson labs. Yes, one of them is local in Santa Clara, but the other 2, one is in Washington, Wenatchee, Washington, and the other is in Amsterdam.
Okay, so
really
the Barcelona show will be running off the Amsterdam data center.
Not primarily, it would be one of the main sites, but at any point in time, the infrastructure that actually is delivering Handson labs can be distributed anywhere in the world. So it's not necessarily one that takes over just because it's local, or closer, if you will.
Okay, Matt, and what's EMC's part in the Handson lab?
We've supported the Handson Labs since I think the very beginning. I can remember all the way back to 2009, having a bunch of CX4s and those kinds of things back then. Today we supply pretty much exclusively XtremIO storage for these labs because that's just the right product for the right job. And I think we support the majority of the storage for that lab at this point.
Okay, unpack that for us a little. Why XtremIO? Obviously I would say performance has to be number 1 on the list there, but why XtremIO?
I think I might defer to Patrick a little bit. I would probably argue that reliability is probably your highest priority.
Well, I think it's actually a multitude of things. Okay. Obviously performance is critical, reliability is paramount. But it's also the content itself and how we can leverage different platforms, and this with the most optimal being XtremIO because of the high dedupe ratio that we can achieve on the actual underlying labs.
Great. So a lot of it comes down to a platform like XtremIO where you've got multiple controllers, 2 controllers per brick, and we've got multiple bricks in every cluster. Means that a brick failure or something like that is not a hugely catastrophic event for us, and then just ridiculously high, consistent IOs and sub-millisecond response times all the time, guaranteed, means that Patrick's team can just rely that it's just gonna work. And in fact, I believe, Patrick, last year, the first time that you guys had 100% storage uptime was last year on XtremIO.
That's absolutely correct.
All right, so does anybody have, what speeds and feeds, what kind of hero numbers can you share about what you've done at the show so far this year, or what the plan is?
Well, the show isn't over, so I mean, obviously it would be based on the last couple of days, but what I can tell you now is that compared to last year where we had both traditional storage platform and XtremIO, this year, outside of the SDD infrastructure, it's 100% XtremIO. And in that regard, we're actually increasing the scope, obviously, but we're actually diminishing the footprint. What we've come to understand and appreciate at XtremIO is the flexibility and power of the platform. By where at this stage, we're able to conceivably run 100% off the show off 2 bricks. And compared to last year with the traditional storage platform, we achieved that same scope in 6 full racks. So you went from 6 full racks to 12U. In and of itself is an amazing.
So Patrick, when you build out the labs, how much is the application a focus of building there? Getting some questions from kind of those watching.
Application in the actually what the lab content is serving up.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, absolutely. It's paramount to the delivery because there's obviously a consideration on the formation and presentation of that lab, but also on the performance impact that lab will have on the underlying infrastructure. Some labs are relatively minor, they mean more interactive clicks through. Others have a massive impact in translation to the performance characteristics that we need to align to from an infrastructure standpoint.
Okay, and so I assume the internal cloud is something that lives on well beyond the kind of the VMworld
Absolutely.
shows. How much is there a build up for this event, or does this run on kind of the existing infrastructure?
Well, no, there is a burst element. Normally we don't have 550 concurrent people demanding upwards of 15,000 VMs at any point in time. So there is a burst element, but there's also very much a steady state. This is our internal private cloud. This isn't necessarily purposely built just for this one event and then decommissioned.
And to that point, the OneCloud and all the stuff that supports it, Project Knee and so on and so forth, actually is running 100% of the time
Yes.
for customers live and ready to
Yeah,
go.
one of the new services we launched last year was actually HOL Public, by where the HOL labs lived on well after VMworld was over, and by where customers can come in and continue to take labs throughout the year.
All right, so Matt, you've been in the lab so far, things running pretty smooth, we don't have big lines. I remember 2010, I think I came there.
I remember
They had
2010.
lines out the door, some of those things. What have you seen over the last few years as kind of the maturity of what goes on in the hands-on labs?
Well, I think to your point, back in 2010 and even maybe 2011, there were definitely lines out the door. There were some stability issues, and I think ever since Patrick's team took on a lot of this, and it was really treated like this critical environment that people had to use, like a true 24/7 environment. The availability's been incredible. This year, 100% uptime. Last year, 100% uptime, and it's so far, I can't imagine any complaints. When I go in, I was just in the room earlier and looking at the arrays. One of them, one of the ones in Santa Clara, is had a bit of a hot moment for it, which was 53,000 IOs a second, which is not even a third of what we rate that system for. But most of the time, they kind of just hover there at maybe 10% of what they're capable of.
Okay, and can I ask, is there anything, are there converged infrastructures used as this, or any rest of the cloud suite? What kind of plugs in beyond the Extreme IO? How does that connect with everything else?
No, we definitely, the purpose of VMworld is to showcase our latest, greatest technologies, so we do have about 10% of Handson Lab running on all of Evo Rack and vSAN, so our latest technologies. It's definitely a showcase, and we want to put it in the most visible light possible.
Yeah, that's the Evo Rack, not the Evo Rail?
That's Evo Rack,
okay.
which is interesting because we're actually, the lab for Evo Rail is running on Evo Rack.
Okay, yeah, can you, it's new to a lot of people, can you kind of,
Sure.
Tease it out for us a little bit, kind of the rail versus rack? We talked a little bit about rail earlier, kind of, 4 servers, kind of in a configuration with a number of partners. How does that differ from the rail, and what can we expect to see there?
So unfortunately, I don't know much about the rail. From an Evo Rack standpoint, absolutely, it's all converged infrastructure predicated on like vSAN technologies, by where we can leverage internal storage to deliver similar infrastructure and compute platforms than where you would consider more traditionally, that we've aligned to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about, vSAN has a certain set of applications that it's really geared for, as opposed to, say, Extreme IO. There's some overlap. For example, VDI could fit in both of those. But other than that, I think of Extreme IO. Database environments, something that would be a great fit for an all-flash array versus not necessarily where vSAN's first target is. Any comments on that, Matt?
I think it's interesting because when you look at the I/O profiles that OneCloud tends to push into these systems, we looked at them closely last year after the show, and they are incredibly write heavy, more so than I think I would have expected, and they're incredibly latency sensitive. If those latencies start to get up there in the 5, 6, 7 milliseconds range, customers really start to feel it. Okay. And so both of those really play well into the designs of both XtremIO and vSAN. vSAN's great at some of this low latency stuff that it can do with data locality and that sort of thing, and XtremIO is great at that too.
Is something you want to add, Patrick? Or?
Well, I don't think the conversation is separate from what we're doing with EvoRack and what we're doing with XtremIO. I think as the cloud infrastructure and operations team, you have a variety of platforms and architecture that you can align to, and it's all based on the use case and what your customers' requirements are. So.
Great. So I'm just curious, Patrick, maybe it's for you, is what lessons do you learn every year at VMworld? Building kind of year over year, does any of what goes on here at VMworld, translate itself into kind of product requirements?
Of course, absolutely. I think the biggest lesson learned in something like VMworld is that you can take lessons learned from the past, but don't think that they're going to translate 100% into the present. And it's an ongoing learning process, and I think that with any cloud infrastructure and operations team that defines how we do business every day.
All right, yeah. Matt, anything else you kind of want to share from what you've seen in the maturity, where's the opportunity for us to kind of move the labs forward?
I think it's interesting. I'd love to see continued use of EvoRack and EvoRail to push those. One of the things that we've been hearing a lot from VMware recently is their increased desire to sort of dog food their own stuff, right?
Yeah, I think Pat actually said this morning it's extreme dog fooding.
Extreme dog fooding, and I think this is a great start to see more of it. And we can help with certain parts of it. XtremIO certainly can stress an ESXi host pretty well, deliver almost anything that it could possibly ask for. And then we can also stress the other parts of it, sort of the SDDC and vSAN sides. So what I really look forward to is sort of pushing that envelope even further to Patrick's point about, let's try to see, we've historically overbuilt these environments a little bit, but now we're actually starting to decrease the footprint a little bit to see how much can we really get this down to something even closer to a customer possible scenario.
Yeah, Matt, since I've got you on here, I mean, you've done some interesting tests looking at really scalable architectures. Uh-huh. I mean, I know I read your blogs that you did on Scale.io. Do you do the labs yourself? Are you involved in some of the architecture pieces? How does it play into kind of your day-to-day job?
Are you talking about the hands-on labs, or?
So I'm saying, right? Do you take some of the labs and
Oh, I absolutely take the labs.
Yeah.
It's probably one of my most favorite things to do here. Okay. I honestly, if I were a customer, yeah. My top 2 things to do would be to come take the labs, yeah. and go to what are sort of listed as the advanced technical sessions. I always end up taking a lab, and I never have time to take all the labs that I want. Yeah. I think my favorite so far this year has been the advanced NSX lab. Okay. My weakest area is networking, and so I learned a lot from that lab.
Okay. Yeah, Patrick. Anything what's been hot this year? Is you had to reconfigure.
Definitely, everything we're doing with the EvoRack, EvoRail,
yeah,
and NSX are all basically the top 3 labs at this point. It's very exciting what those technologies can offer and bring to the market.
Okay, so yeah, I think I just want to give you each a last chance to kind of give a plug for something they should check out. There's 2 more days left, and I'm sure there's things that people can follow up afterwards. So Matt, I'll let you start.
Well, I think I'd have to plug my session. Come on. I have a session this afternoon on automating very, very large scale environments using things like Python and VCO and those kinds of technologies. So if you want to take what you learn about the infrastructure side of that and things like EvoRack and EvoRail and XtremIO and apply those to an environment with hundreds or even thousands of hosts and how to deal with that in the same fashion, it's a good place to start.
All right, and we can also find some of your stuff. Hopefully you'll be having your findings on your blog,
It's always on my blog, exaforge.com.
All right, and Patrick?
Yeah, and just for me, come visit us in Hands-On Labs. Please take a lab. Come visit us in the NOC. This year, like the year previous, we want to be full disclosure, full visibility, so we have the monitoring up. It's all real time. Feel free to ask us any questions you might have.
Yeah,
Look
and,
forward to seeing you.
if somebody's not at VMworld or they don't get to all the labs, how do they engage, in between the shows?
So once VMworld San Francisco actually concludes over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to be migrating all of the 2014 content into HOL Public, so they'll be able to take the lab at that time.
All right, guys, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Definitely when I talk to the practitioner, the hands-on labs are always some of the highlights for them. So we will be right back with our continuous coverage from VMworld after this quick break.